Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a very quick personal announcement. I am moving out of a house that I've been in for almost 2 decades, and for somebody with my health problems and disabilities, that is a major task. So I love my podcast. I'm giving it everything I've got to try to keep it going at the same speed while I'm trying to pack up, move out, have repairs done to the house, get it sold, move into a transitional situation, and build a new place. But these are very, very major tasks for somebody in my condition. And my health is already taking a major toll trying to keep all these balls in the air. So I will continue to give it my absolute all, and I really appreciate each of my listeners. You guys have already made this podcast grow quite a bit this year. I don't want to lose you. So if I'm not able to maintain this pace over the next couple of months and the podcast drops back down to once a week, or even if I miss a week here and there just because my health completely drops at the bottom, please just bear with me for a little bit, because things will even back out after a couple of months and we'll be back to normal. So I just hope you can extend me a little bit of understanding. I'm doing the absolute best I can. So with that, let's get started on this week's episode, Making You an Offer You Can't Refuse, Part 3, Passing the Torch to Gen Z. This week, we are returning, as promised, to an appeal I made as we began a new year, an appeal to Gen Z to move towards creating a new world. We started this series with a hard look at the modern forms of slavery. Why? Because Gen Z clearly wants a cause to fight for, but they have also made it inescapably clear that left to their own devices, they will choose from a pile of noxious losers to be their latest cause. So I felt that the rest of us need to help bring to their attention some of the causes that are actually worth fighting for. Rather than complaining, let's start suggesting some loftier alternatives, many of which are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for people to get motivated enough to finally do something about them. And what could possibly be a more ambitious cause than putting an end to human slavery in all of its modern forms? As it's been a couple of months since we first broached this subject, let's review a bit so that we can wrap our minds around the full extent of this problem one final time. How bad can the slavery problem really be, given the enlightened, superior, modern world that we presently live in? Well, hundreds of slaves are sold every week in Libya. Cameroon has 800,000 slaves. Niger, Nigeria, Mali, and Mozambique all still have slaves today. The International Labor Organization says that 7 out of every 1,000 Africans today is a slave. That would be nearly 10 million people. By comparison, there was a total of 11 million victims during the entire transatlantic slave trade combined. So where are the protests for today's slaves? Where are the protests for the millions more who are enslaved around the world by human traffickers? It's not like a problem this big could be a secret that no one knows anything about. Why didn't all of the BLM activists protest when the Houthis started up slavery again in Yemen? Don't those lives matter to them? The same activists who make their livings by being race hustlers, who are busy condemning the immorality of the forms of slavery that went on hundreds of years ago, which I also condemn, never have so much as a single word to say about the people who are engaging in slavery today. Why is that? I don't know about you, but that seems a bit odd to me. If their focus was actually on slavery and its inherent evil, then their first priority would be to condemn those who are engaging in it today and to free those who are the actual living victims of it right now. But they ignore the present in favor of the past, and ignore the slavers of the modern era, many of which are people of color, in favor of the villains of the past. Even then, they are only interested in the white villains from bygone days. They are not at all interested in the other races who also engaged in slavery during that same time, people who never voluntarily gave it up, either. Clearly, their moral outrage is not very sincere. Not when they care less about the plight of people living under slavery this very moment than they do about the people who lived in slavery 8 generations ago, people that we can't help. There's no way to win that fight. And so there is no risk that any of the people that they stir up by beating the drum about past atrocities might feel empowered to find out that they are actually capable of achieving a meaningful victory here in the present. They don't have to worry that young people might become confident enough to stand on their own 2 feet and become independent thinkers, and thereby lose all of their usefulness to the puppet masters who currently pull their strings. So I ask you, Gen Z, why are you settling for the truly immoral cause of "from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," which is a call for genocide, according to the people who came up with that chant, when your cause could be "from each sea to shining sea, every human being shall be free"? You could bring to fruition the greatest cause that was ever started by the heroes who came before you. And as you stand on the shoulders of the people who began this fight, you could do something even bigger than they did. So why aren't you embracing your destiny? You might ask, just how many slaves are there in the world right now? Answer: the global estimate 4 years ago was that there were 49.6 million slaves worldwide. 28 million of those people are enslaved through forced labor or were born into slavery, while 22 million more are enslaved through the use of arranged marriages that they are forced into against their will, often while they are still children. In fact, over 12 million slaves are children. 29 million slaves are held in Asia and elsewhere in the Pacific. At least 7 million of them are in Africa. Another 6 million are in Europe and Central Asia. 5 million are in North and South America. And 2 million people live as slaves in Arab nations. Just 10 nations hold 2/3 of the world's slaves between them: India, North Korea, China, Pakistan, Russia, Indonesia, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Turkey, and the United States. 17 countries have governments who use forced labor, enslaving 3.9 million people between them. Slavery is the most prevalent in the Arab world, where there are 10.1 slaves for every 1,000 people. When individual countries are assessed on a case-by-case basis, North Korea is by far the worst offender, where 104.6 out of every 1,000 people are currently living as slaves. That's more than 1 in 10. Turkey is 5th on that list, with 15.6 out of every 1,000 people living as slaves. The UAE is almost as bad at 13.4 slaves per 1,000 people. Russia, Afghanistan, and Kuwait sit at 13 slaves per 1,000. Venezuela sits at 9.5, Syria at 8.7, Haiti at 8.2, India, the Congo, and Kosovo at 8, Lebanon at 7.6, Iran at 7.1, Qatar at 6.8, Mexico at 6.6, Sri Lanka at 6.5, Yemen at 6, and here in the United States, 3.3 out of every 1,000 people are slaves. Norway has the best stats in the world at half a slave per 1,000, or 1 slave out of every 2,000 people, while Japan has the best stats in Asia at 1.1 per 1,000. Australia and New Zealand have 1.6 slaves per 1,000 people, but 4 countries haven't even made human trafficking illegal there. Those would be Hong Kong, Somalia, North Korea, and Vanuatu. The International Labor Organization says that slavery is still increasing, not decreasing. It has continued to rise significantly in the last 5 years. 10 million slaves were added to the world's tally just between 2016 and 2021 alone, which was when the world reached 50 million slaves. Even if that number has plateaued and the growth rate has continued on at the same level, which there is no reason to believe that has happened, then we would actually be at around 58 million slaves in the world today. Once again, during the entire transatlantic slave trade combined, there was a total of 11 million slaves taken from the continent of Africa by Westerners. Even during the much larger Islamic trans-Saharan slave trade, which went on during the same time as the transatlantic slave trade did, and it continued to go on long after the transatlantic slave trade ended, they took 18 million slaves from Africa. Both slave trades, on both sides of the world, when you add up all of their victims over all of the years that they existed, they took 29 million slaves from Africa, combined. And by comparison, in one given year, there are at least 49.6 million slaves in the world as we are speaking right now. That is already an average of nearly one person out of every 150 people planet-wide who are living the life of a slave right now. I promised you an impressive cause. 27.6 million people are victims of human trafficking and have ended up enslaved that way. And at least 1 million of those victims are right here in the United States. We are one of the largest destinations in the world for modern slavers to sell their trafficked victims. Super Bowl Sunday is the biggest slave auction day for sex traffickers in America every year. That might have been a little less this year with P. Diddy behind bars, but it's still a huge problem, people. In our first episode on this topic, I pointed out that none of us will be able to succeed in changing this problem, as big as it is, if most people continue to be unaware that it is a problem that they need to be doing something about. So getting the word out there has to happen before we can even start this fight. This drum needs to be beat until it falls apart. Luckily, Gen Z is fantastic about getting stuff out there on social media. You guys love sharing links and reposting things and fueling viral stories, and you rock at it. So play to your strengths. I can't do it. I'm awful when it comes to social media, and I have no desire to get any better at it. I'm the love 'em and leave 'em type when it comes to the online world. I'm in, I'm out, I don't get emotional, and I don't get attached. I might come back the next day or not show up again 4 months at a time. When it comes to tech in general, I'm lucky when I eventually figure out the simple stuff. That's why this can't be my cause, but it can be yours. You can actually light the world on fire with this revolution. So get out there and do it. Do what you do best. Obsess on your keyboards until this is all that people are talking about. You will have to get some major momentum going before you can accomplish anything meaningful in the way of change. And no matter the country you are living in, getting the word out can be the start of your contribution to getting this movement off the ground. In January's episode, I focused on the problem here in the United States. I pointed out that in America, the conservative estimate is that we have 12 million people here illegally right now. And that does not take into account any of the unknown gotaways, of which there are millions more. But let's just consider the 12 million known illegal immigrants that are here. That's equal to the entire combined populations of 11 states. Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, Rhode Island, Montana, Maine, New Hampshire, and Hawaii. And that's the conservative estimate. But what does any of this have to do with slavery? I'll tell you. illegal immigration is how the modern slavers bring their human cargo into the United States in order to sell them here. That may not be what you want to hear, but that is an ugly fact, and one that you have to face up to, like it or not. Migrants are among the most vulnerable people who can easily end up being victimized by these traffickers, enslaved, and then sold. With the border absolutely wide open, as it has been for the last 4 years, some of the millions of people who crossed illegally into our country were neither trafficker nor trafficked. But by choosing to go about things in that way, illegally, when they could have easily come across legally, they unintentionally provided the necessary cover for the slavers by overwhelming border patrol for them. Agents were spread too thin to find and stop the traffickers, which meant that they never had a chance to free these modern slaves as they were being smuggled into the country. We want immigration, but we want every single bit of it to be legal immigration so that we can decide who we are letting in and vet everyone properly. That way, we can also be sure that innocent people aren't being hurt in the process. You can't end slavery if you continue to have illegal immigration. But the good news is that you can have legal immigration and still end slavery. So let's put out the effort to make people do things the right way. It's worth it, after all, to keep some poor person from living as someone else's slave, isn't it? I have repeatedly pointed out that this cause has nothing to do with being on the left or the right, politically speaking. I would argue that you can oppose Trump as a person for the rest of his life if you want to. I'm certainly not going to try and stop you. But surely you're not willing to support slavery just to oppose Trump. At worst, even a stopped clock is right twice a day, people. Anyone who opposes slavery is right, no matter who they are, even if it's Trump. So don't worry about which side he is on, and don't let that determine which side you are going to be on. Fight to end slavery no matter who is doing the same thing, and no matter who is not joining this fight. Although it might be worth noting and remembering who the people are that don't want to see this atrocity come to an end. Fight the fights that need fighting, not the ones that center around the guy that you like or dislike the most. Trump put Tom Homan in charge of the border. He is now our new border czar. He ran ICE and worked in immigration under 6 different presidents, both Democrats and Republicans. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for George Bush. He worked for Bill Clinton. He worked for George W. Bush. He worked for Barack Obama. And he worked for Donald Trump the last time around. Now he has come out of retirement once again to get the border back under control. Again. The media has aggressively tried to paint Tom as a calloused individual who hates immigrants and who is going to go on some sort of a rampage against them. This is because they fight their fights based on how much they hate the person who is spearheading the opposition. So you'll have to be the grown-ups in the room, Gen Z, and show the old guard how to rise above and fight the fights that need fighting. Despite the media's best efforts, the majority of people have not fallen for their slander of Tom. After all, if people just get on the internet, they can look up the videos and see exactly what he has had to say for himself. So we did that very thing and covered what Tom has actually said, what his plans are, and all of the fear-mongering lies that the media has been spreading in an embarrassingly unsuccessful attempt to garner the pitiful opposition arrayed against him. If you want an in-depth look at what Tom had to say in his own words, then I encourage you to go back and listen to January's episode in order to get a more comprehensive view of the problem. Today, I will just briefly recap for you a few of the things that Tom had to say to Dr. Phil. The first message was his answer to the question why he was so passionate about this particular issue. Quote, "Because of the tragedies I've seen in my career. I started as a Border Patrol agent in 1984, so I wore the uniform. I became an ICE agent, first ICE director that actually came up through the ranks. I've talked to young girls as young as 9 that were raped multiple times by members of the cartel. And you get on your knees and you talk to a little girl that had everything innocent and pure ripped from her. She'll never be the same. It moves you. I stood in the back of a tractor trailer with 19 dead aliens at my feet, including a 5-year-old little boy. They were all in their underwear because they were baking to death. They died in that steel box. That one congressman said I didn't care about dying children unless they were white. I stood there and knelt beside that 5-year-old boy and put my hands on him and said a prayer for him because I knew what his last hour of life was like. No one deserves to die that way, especially children. I've held many dying people. I've held many dead people and talked to a lot of women and children that were sexually assaulted. It all could be prevented if we secure the border. A secure border saves lives. So I wake up every day pissed off at what this administration did to the most secure border of my lifetime. We're going to secure the border once again to save lives. The second point that Tom made so effectively had to do with the inhumane reality behind the compassionate-sounding theory of open borders. We had the most secure border ever. Illegal immigration at a 45-year low. Illegal immigration was down 83 to 90% depending on what time frame you looked at. So we can do it again, and we have to do it. People say President Trump's policies are inhumane, they're racist, and it's just nothing further from the truth. There's studies done. 31% of women who make that journey through the cartels admitted to being sexually assaulted. So we know that number is probably higher, right? When President Trump had illegal immigration at a 45-year low, when 90% less people were coming, how many women weren't being sexually assaulted? How many children didn't drown in that river? How many pounds of fentanyl didn't get into the country to kill Americans? How many women and children weren't sex trafficked? Under Joe Biden, sex trafficking is up 600%. Fentanyl has killed over 250,000 Americans. Record number of people on terrorist watch lists coming across the border. In the Trump administration, we had 13. They got over 300. So President Trump's policy saved lives by the thousands. Most humane policy they've ever seen. Securing the border saves lives, period. Over 500,000 children have entered this country through the use of cartels, separated from families. In this administration, who didn't properly vet the sponsors they released them to, they can't find over 300,000 of them. And that's something President Trump's committed to doing, finding these children and saving them. It's not a coincidence in 4 years of an unsecured border, we have historic overdose deaths from fentanyl. It is coming across between the ports of entry, but the Border Patrol's overwhelmed. And that's what people need to understand. They want to talk about innocent illegal immigration. They're coming for a better life. I get that. But you need to understand when you overwhelm the system like they've done the last 4 years, most of the Border Patrol's no longer on patrol. They're making sandwiches, changing diapers. They're making hospital runs. They're dealing with humanitarian crises. So when you pull 70% of agents off their national security duty, that's when they move the fentanyl in to kill Americans. That's when they move the 600% increase in sex trafficking. That's when the bad people come. And look, 2 million people paid more to get away. Why did 2 million people pay more to get away? Because they could have paid less. Get to the border, cartel's job's done. Turn yourself into a green uniform, get processed, get released within 24 hours. Get a free airline ticket to the city of your choice. Get a free hotel room. Get 3 meals a day. get free medical care, and in 90 to 120 days, get work authorization, which is the very reason you came here. Why did 2 million people pay more to get away? Because they didn't want to be vetted. They didn't want to be fingerprinted. That should scare the hell out of everybody. It scares the hell out of me. How many of those came from a country sponsoring terror? End quote. Under the ridiculously wide-open border of the Biden administration, there were legal ports of entry everywhere. Yet the cartels flooded people across in between those ports of entry so that the Border Patrol had to stop patrolling and go assist those stranded people, leaving large gaps for the traffickers to use. These people who crossed in between the legal ports of entry still had the option to do so without facing any consequences as long as they went up to a green uniform. They would still get all of those goodies that Tom just listed, despite entering the country illegally. Only the agents in brown uniforms would turn them around and send them home for crossing the border illegally. The cartels knew all of this. They told this to the people that they were bringing across. We know that they told them this because they told us that they knew these things. The only reason to cross illegally and then run from Border Patrol and pay the dangerous cartels even more money to help you avoid and get away from the people in the green shirts with the goodie bags would be if you had something really bad to hide. Quote, so day one, we're going to be looking for these public safety threats, arresting them, detaining them, and deporting them. And if the sanctuary city mayors don't want to help, then get the hell out of the way, 'cause we're coming. We're doing it. End quote. You might ask, which of our states ended up bearing the burden of feeding and housing most of these illegal immigrants? And which states suffered from the enormous rise in crime as a result of allowing drug dealers and gang members to sneak in with the immigrants while we were refusing to vet each person properly? Most immigrants went to the largest cities in the states of California, New York, Florida, and Texas. So they aren't working on farms picking our food like we are constantly being told. And illegal immigrants in California have been arrested for allegedly being among the arsonists who were caught deliberately setting additional fires there. So, California, New York, Florida, and Texas. 2 of those are blue states. 2 of them are red ones. This is not a partisan issue, or at least it shouldn't be. It is impacting people on both sides of the aisle, and both sides need to be working towards fixing it. After all of the politicians out there, regardless of their party affiliation, work for us, the American people, not for themselves, and not even for other people with needs and wants across the rest of the world. They can have compassion for all of the people who live in other parts of the world and sympathize with the problems that they face, as we all should. But that's not who they work for. They work for the people who elected them to represent us and our interests, i.e. Americans. And we need to never let them forget that again. Any politician who has trouble remembering that simple, foundational reality about the job that they've been hired to do needs to be immediately fired. We will replace them with someone who can manage to remember what their job is and what it isn't, and who they answer to. New York, for example, offers illegal immigrants cash assistance, burial cost assistance, help via emergency cash assistance, free school meals, free housing in historic 5-star hotels, free meals costing over $20 a plate delivered 3 times a day to their hotel, translators, art therapy classes for their children, etc. New York City alone is spending over $4.6 billion every year on costs like these for illegal immigrants. What if we could be putting all of that money towards the national debt instead, and thereby lower the cost of living for all of our citizens? Or how about putting it towards helping our nation's homeless veterans by providing them with adequate help for their mental health issues for a change? Maybe we could put a dent in that whole 44-a-day thing if everyone got the priorities that we are actually responsible for straight for a change. Yet the vast majority of Americans do still support legal immigration, according to all of the polls. When done legally, immigration seems to be a net gain, despite some of the initial costs to us. The problem is illegal immigration, most especially because it allows the dangerous cartels to traffic in drugs, crime, and human beings in the form of slaves. Crossing the border illegally is a crime. It is a misdemeanor, and that is a deportable offense. The people who cross illegally know that. They are making the free choice to go about things in that illegal way. If they choose to do things legally instead, there won't be any problems. Yes, there is more red tape that way. But we do have the right to demand that from them as the price of being granted entry into our country. After all, we're not obligated to let anybody immigrate into our homeland. But that unwelcoming attitude is not who we are. But we aren't doormats to be spit on either. The problem really was the Biden administration. They enabled cartel traffickers and slavers to victimize innocent people, and they went on enabling them to do so long after the consequences of their policies became obvious. Whether you compare Biden's policies to Trump's or to Obama's, Biden was the anomaly. He was the radical one when compared to either side of the aisle in the past. Under Trump, there were approximately 2 million deportations during his 4 years in office. Under Obama's first 4 years, there were 3.2 million deportations and another 2.1 million during his second 4 years. So both of the former presidents were doing roughly about the same job. Tom was in charge under both of those men. That was him doing the deportations under a Democrat like Obama and under Trump. Yet the media acts like bringing back Obama's guy is somehow monstrous and dangerous. In fact, President Obama gave Tom a Presidential Rank Award for the job he did during his administration. It was the Biden administration that was the aberration here. It was that administration that acted more like a crime family than a legitimate government of the people. They enabled the very worst members of the human race to do the worst things imaginable to other innocent human beings, and they are not going to be remembered kindly for having done that. Tom said, quote, "I don't care about politics. I don't care what people think about me, never have. I'm going to do the job. It should be a nonpartisan issue. Let's forget about illegal immigration for a minute. When you cause a crisis as big as the Biden administration has done, now we're talking about 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl, 600% increase in sex trafficking, a record number of aliens that have died crossing this border, historic number, almost 4,000 have died crossing this border under the Biden administration. We're talking about enormous suspected terrorist threats coming at record numbers. This isn't about illegal immigration. When you cause a crisis this big, it causes all these bad things to happen. So when you talk about terrorism or 250,000 dead Americans, this should be a nonpartisan issue, I would think. And Republicans, Democrats, and independents, we all agree on this. But the left still doesn't get it. And I find that troubling. I've seen so many tragedies in my lifetime. Some of those still keep me up at night. While you and I are talking right now, women are being raped by criminal cartels on the border. While we're talking right now. A child will die tonight, and I'm done with it. I'm sick of it. A secure border saves lives, and I can't wait to January 20th when President Trump is back in power and we secure this border, end quote. And those efforts are now thankfully underway and succeeding. February saw the best border stats in recorded history for our country. I promised Gen Z that I would return to this topic in order to look once more at modern slavery 1 week before Super Bowl Sunday, which is the biggest day each year for human traffickers who are looking to sex traffic their victims in the United States. That Sunday last month was an awful day for a lot of victims out there. I said I would take a look at what people all around the world could do to help put an end to this atrocity. But I warned Gen Z right then that they weren't going to like it one little bit. My proposition for them really tested how committed Gen Z really is to the ideals they preach when it means giving up a few of their luxuries, comforts, and privileges for a little while. Gen Z is too young to remember, but there used to be a lot of blood diamonds in the world. Criminal gangs in Africa were rounding up slave labor, including children, whom they brutalized viciously in order to mine those profitable diamonds, which they then sold all over the world. There were children who lost limbs to their brutality, all in order to get a pretty stone that sparkles out of the earth and into a jewelry store near you. When enough attention was finally drawn to this fact, people began to realize that their shiny baubles meant that someone else was paying for them in blood and tears, and people began refusing to buy blood diamonds anymore. They demanded transparency from their jewelers. The dealers now had to be able to prove where their diamonds came from and that slave labor had not been used to mine them. And that simple stand ended that atrocity. Slave labor has to stop being profitable if you want to end it in countries where you have no authority or power to change things. When China has to put up nets around some of their factories in order to prevent the workers there from jumping to commit suicide, that should tell you something. It also tells you something when China sends its Uyghur population to labor camps, where they sterilize them against their will. The question is, are you willing to put a stop to it by deciding to stop buying products from China? Are you willing to do whatever it takes in order to bring economic pressures to bear and force them to change, or not? Are you willing to pressure companies like Apple to move their factories out of China as a part of that pressure, even by holding the threat of a boycott over them if they refuse? Are you willing to give up your iPhone and buy your technology from a different company who is not working with a country that uses slave labor until changes are made? Or does the brand of your goodies mean more to you than the slaves who suffer around the world to make cheap products? Too harsh? Maybe, but it's also true and therefore fair. There has never been a real cause that was won without some real sacrifices being made as a part of that deal. And when compared to the sacrifices that were made by those who fought these forces in the past, people who often had to risk their lives in order to create change, is this sacrifice really that big by comparison? Are you willing to put in the effort to look into the clothing brands that you patronize with your money and demand transparency from them so that you know that your cute top wasn't made in a sweatshop in the Philippines? Are you willing to buy clothing exclusively from companies that can prove that they do not use slave labor from third world countries in order to maximize their profits? Are you willing to buy more expensive jeans from a company that is not victimizing innocent people, which means that you may only be able to afford to buy 2 pairs of jeans instead of 3? Are you willing to do that in order to keep a child from living his life as a slave, all to give you cheap goods that you like? I'll even give you your first tip. Jocko Willink has a clothing company that does things the right way. Google him. Now, Here was where I knew that I was going to lose you all last month. So if you missed that episode, brace yourself. Are you willing to force TikTok to divest from Chinese ownership by agreeing to watch your videos on one of the countless other platforms out there if they don't? Are you willing to support the ban if they refuse to divest from Chinese ownership rather than to be manipulated into being their pawns in this fight? Or is your social media addiction just too strong? Is your morality only a bunch of empty posturing? Or are you willing to sacrifice something that actually means something to you? If you're on the fence about how willing you really are to make these sacrifices in your own life in order to make a difference, then I encourage you to watch the film The Sound of Freedom. That movie is the true story of an actual hero, Tim Ballard. It is a heartbreaking look at the world of trafficking and its victims. It never crosses the line into being graphic, but the awful reality is no less unbearable to contemplate for the lack of visuals. This film absolutely does not gloss over the reality of what some of our fellow human beings have to endure. At one point in the film, a man realizes that he has unknowingly had sex with a minor who has been trafficked into prostitution. In that moment, he realizes that he is the cause of the sadness in that broken child's eyes. Are you really willing to be the same cause of sadness in the eyes of some other child across multiple homes around the world so that you can have your apps and your favorite tech brands and your trendy products? Surely you can make the sacrifice of watching one uncomfortable movie if it provides the motivation that you need to get off your ass and start putting an end to this. It might even cause you to start asking some good questions, like, why did Hollywood go to such monumental efforts to smear this movie and its real-life hero when this should have been a cause tailor-made for the showy celeb champions of the oppressed? It might even cause you to question if Hollywood's known problem with sexually exploiting children has anything to do with their motives in making their unsuccessful attempt to keep people from seeing this film. And then those questions could lead you to a place where you would have to pass on seeing a movie that you really wanted to see because you refused to put money into the hands of a celebrity that you suspect may have something more costly than jewelry on them. The question is, are you willing to take a stand? Or is it easier to just post hashtags while you change nothing in this world? Yeah, consider that me daring you to rise up and actually be worthy by impressing the hell out of the world. Money. More than anything else, money is how you change things. Because people, companies, and even nations will change, and quickly, when you threaten to give them less of your money if they don't. Blood diamonds proved that. The Budweiser boycott proved that. So are you willing to do the research on a company before you buy their products? Are you willing to share that research with other people so that they know which companies to stay away from until they clean up their act and are willing to become completely transparent? For example, are you willing to refuse to buy iPhones until they sever their ties with China and get some other brand just for a year in order to make these changes happen? Or are you only looking for the kind of cause that asks nothing more from you than having you post some faux outrage online in a show of fealty? Do you want to make a real difference or not? Are you only interested in participating in all of the cheap, empty virtue signaling of today's performance culture? You're adults now, Gen Z, and it's time to decide who you are going to be. I told the people who were interested in the genuine article to come back today for our final episode on what they could do to help end modern slavery. It starts with getting the word out. The rubber meets the road with the all-powerful dollar. But there's one final angle, and today I'm going to need some input from the minds of people who are more brilliant than I am when it comes to some of the final details. So get ready for a little audience participation today, because I'm officially passing the torch to you from here on out. While I may disagree with various organizations when it comes to what they include under the heading of slave labor, there are things that all of us can agree on. I disagree with some of these groups who consider it to be slave labor when a government forces its criminal population in their prison system to work while they are there. Room and board aren't free out here in the real world, and I don't see why they should become free in prison either. After all, going to prison is supposed to be a punishment, not an upgrade from your normal life. Jail is not supposed to be a place where you are treated better than you would be if you were somewhere else. If you have to earn your way out here in the world, you should have to keep doing that while you serve your time in prison. You may disagree with me about that, which is fine. It's completely acceptable for people to disagree with each other. And it's even healthy to hear each other out as arguments are made on all sides. That's how we learn and reconsider and evolve. But when it comes to many of the categories on this issue, like human trafficking, for instance, there is no debate that this is slavery. 4 countries in the world have not even criminalized human trafficking by making it illegal there. Hong Kong, Somalia, North Korea, and Vanuatu. In many cases, each of our governments could put pressure on these countries as the worst offenders to get them to change their policies and step up. In addition to the individual people who could band together by refusing to buy products from those countries, as well as others like them who aren't doing enough to crack down on the atrocities that are happening in their jurisdictions, Western governments could sanction them if we, the people, pressure them to do so. The U.S. Department of Labor makes their lists available to the public, showing the countries that are compromised by slave labor and the products that they produce. China, Ghana, the Congo, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and the Dominican Republic are all listed, just to name a few. The compromised products that they produce are used in our touchscreen devices, flat-screen TVs, solar panels, and LEDs. They range from auto parts, construction tools, and soda cans to cotton clothing and textiles. Some chocolate candies, alcohol, processed food, and cosmetic products are also tainted. Electric cars, vacuum cleaners, baby formula, cleaning products, soap, and tobacco products are a few more of the things that are also listed at www.dol.gov. If we, the consumers, decide to favor the companies who are willing to become transparent, then it will force the other companies to do the same as well in order to survive, just like the revolution that quickly took place within the jewelry industry when it came to blood diamonds. Additional pressure could be brought to bear on the countries who have the biggest problems if the international community were willing to threaten these nations with sanctions if they refuse to address this human issue by really cracking down on human traffickers and any unethical companies. It may also be necessary for the West to threaten to cease giving any foreign aid to certain countries for non-compliance in pulling their weight with these efforts. All of these options make for a very effective strategy that would quickly begin to eradicate this scourge on humankind once and for all. North Korea is the exception. It is by far the biggest offender, but because they are completely isolationists and do not supply the rest of the world with products that we could boycott or sanction, economic pressure is not a weapon that can be used against them. Even if they remain the one exception to a world without slaves, it would still be worth it to end slavery throughout the rest of the world, rather than allowing the people we can help to suffer just because we cannot help everyone. But obviously, we want to end slavery altogether. And that is where it is going to take some of you brilliant people out there coming up with your own creative ideas to add to the start I've attempted to make here in order to get this across the finish line. I've done what I can do. I told you about the cause itself. I emphasize the importance of getting the word out there to all of the people who may not know that this problem even exists on this scale. I've challenged you to use the power of your mighty dollars in the form of boycotts and to pressure those in positions of power to impose international penalties and sanctions where applicable. Where you take it from here is up to you, Gen Z. Good luck. The world is watching you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and follow, because that is what makes these things successful. And I hope you choose to come back next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.